Chapter 29. Later that night she struggled to fall asleep. Goliath was curled up at her side and Muggs at her feet. Thaddeus roosted happily at the end of her bed. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling that hid where all the clothing had been kept in boxes. She couldn't ignore the idea that another man might be buried close by. Why else would all his belongings be stored in the attic? The last thing she needed was to find yet another body. But she couldn't forget the notion. Plus, she was learning she didn't like to wait. Especially for answers. And the fact that she was waiting on other people made it much worse. Why couldn't Mac hand over information to her? Because he doesn't have any yet, idiot. She shook her head. She was tempted to go back to her chatty neighbor and ask more questions tomorrow. She sat up in bed and turned on her lamp, then reached for her laptop. She'd searched earlier, looking for a connection between the two men. It'd be easy enough for one to have had a different father, with a different surname. But it still didn't answer what the potential connection was to the first man who had gone missing. And she hadn't found very much under his name anywhere. Theoretically, any one of them could have owned property on this cul-de-sac too. And maybe there were more relatives than just the two men. With that thought, she searched for the family of the first dead man found, James Farley, to see if he had any sisters or somebody still living. She couldn't find anything, but when she searched for family members of the man who she had just found, Robert Delaney, he had an adopted sister, although their parents were both dead. That was interesting too. But she needed more family information. Stuff that Mac hadn't shared with her. Frustrated, she finally put everything away and lay down on her bed again. Wide awake. Muggs was so laid back that he lay there with his feet in the air, snoozing away. She'd love to sleep a deep sleep like that. But this bed was more conducive to wakefulness than sleepfulness. Her phone rang just then. Startled, she reached for it and checked the caller ID, surprised to find it was Nan. She glanced at the clock. It was late. Nan, are you all right? Yes, dear. I just needed to hear your voice. Doreen didn't know what to say about that. Well, I'm glad you called. I'm just lying here, unable to go to sleep. Well, rumors are circulating here. Something about you finding yet another body? Doreen winced. Oh dear, I was hoping you wouldn't hear about that. It's true? Nan's voice rose in shock. Doreen. I didn't mean to, she said hurriedly. After visiting you, I went a different way home, and I found a body in the creek. Whose body? Nan asked suspiciously. This really isn't helping your reputation in the town, you know, my dear. Doreen rolled her eyes. Nan, I didn't do it on purpose. She could hear Nan's heavy sigh come through the phone. No, of course you didn't. I'm sorry, dear. Could you tell me what time it was you found the body? Doreen stared at her phone, nonplussed. Nan, you want the exact time? Yes. We had a pool on how long before the body was found. Some of the bets are really close. I need to know who the winner is. Doreen rested her back against the headboard. Nan, I thought you were teasing when you first told me that. Besides, she had been really gobbling up those marijuana cookies at the time too. You didn't really have a betting pool on when somebody would find the body, did you? That's morbid. Well, we didn't know for sure he would be dead when he was found. And you found him, didn't you? Yes. She frowned. Nan, how do you know I found the missing handyman? You just said so, dear. Yes, just now. But Doreen cast her mind back on their conversations to remember if she had mentioned the handyman specifically earlier. Not that it matters, dear. Everyone is talking about it. Nan went gaily on to the next subject, completely unrelated. How's Thaddeus? Doreen brushed her hair off her face, wondering just what kind of marijuana-induced haze Nan was in. Thaddeus is fine, Nan. She stared at the bird perched at the end of the bed. Why? Well, he does have a good nose. So, if you had him with you, it's no surprise that you found our missing person. Her voice perked up as she added, oh my goodness, it's actually a great thing. Maybe we can use you and Thaddeus and Muggs to hunt down lost people. No, Doreen cried out. No, Nan. Stop. That's really not how I want people to look at me. Well, it's better than people thinking you murdered all these men. Nan was nothing if not blunt. You could put yourself in my position and realize they might think you murdered all these men, Doreen said slowly. Nan, I found the bodies. I didn't turn them into bodies. Nan laughed. Of course not, dear. I was just teasing. So back to when you found him again. Can you remember exactly what time it was? I phoned the authorities. I probably have a record of the call, so hold on. Doreen looked back at her recent phone calls to when she had contacted Mac. When she came back on the phone, she said, I think it was around 3:15. You think? You do understand that it's kind of important to know these things. People get quite irate if we don't have exact information. I know it was around 3:15, Doreen snapped. She couldn't believe Nan was doing this. Nan, would you please stop betting on things like this? It's very upsetting. Well, we need something to do. Rosemore's a small place where nothing much happens, and we have lots of time on our hands. We bet on lots of things. It just happened to be that Robert Delaney's disappearance was one somebody suggested. We didn't know he would end up dead, did we? Nan paused for a moment and said, Doreen, I hate to say it, but you sound awfully tired. You really should go to sleep. It's after 11, my dear. On that note, she hung up, leaving Doreen to stare at her phone in surprise. And how am I supposed to sleep now? She asked of the empty room. Nan's setting up a betting pool as to when a dead person is to be found. She shook her head. Oh, I feel like I fell down the rabbit hole. Thaddeus straightened a bit. Body in a rabbit hole. Body in a rabbit hole. She glared at the bird as Goliath rolled out and used his claws on her belly to get comfortable, and Muggs kicked out at her feet to make more room. No, there is no body in the rabbit hole. He cocked his head at her and squawked, Are you sure? Are you sure? She groaned, lying down in her bed, pulling the covers over her head. She just wanted this to be all over.